pull up a chair and come on in as we kick off another episode of Sharing with Friends on behalf of Sharing Down Syndrome Arizona, where we have monthly conversations with awesome guests, dynamic guests, around topics that impact the Down syndrome community and the special needs community. So today's guest we welcome is Becca Thompson. She's the owner and lead advocate of Kids Advocacy LLC, where she's been passionately engaged in advocacy work since 2018, providing essential support for families and children with disabilities. So Becca, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're a mom of 4, and one of whom has autism and another who is gifted. So you bring both professional, expertise and personal expertise to this conversation. So we're super excited to kind of just dig in around the topic of educational advocacy, in particular for those with special needs. So welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I have 4 kids, hence the name Kids Advocacy. My oldest is 19. He has autism. My 14-year-old, she has a specific learning disability, math, and then I have twin boys, one of which is gifted, and live on a mini ranch with lots of dogs, lots of chickens and ducks and pigs. So we have a very busy lifestyle. I started many years ago working with adults with with different developmental disabilities and neurobehavioral differences at a group home in California. And that's where I started when I was 18. And then I went into public education at the age of 21 and started working with kids that had behavioral concerns or behavioral differences and autism, and then became a teacher, an administrator, and then moved to Arizona 9 years ago and had a very hard time understanding public education in Arizona, which led me to advocacy. I met an attorney, Susan Marks, who led me down this path of advocating for families and children.
Yeah. So it's really an important conversation, of course, digging into supporting and empowering families, when it comes to ensuring students have the appropriate resources and accommodations. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and get into that. So let's start with, how do parents even know where to start? How do, you in particular, as an expert, as an advocate, how do you help parents understand their rights and responsibilities when it comes to special needs education?
Well, so where does it start? It's a loaded question, right? Usually when I get calls, it's because things aren't going well at that point. So I would say for any parent that is starting out, or a parent that has been had a child with special needs in the educational system for years, you definitely want to educate yourself. There's a very thick packet that the school team will give to you about your parental rights. You can get a summary if you Google it, but basically you'll want to make sure that you start joining groups and educating yourself about your child's disability, about what kind of services are there for your child, what different kinds of accommodations that your child can receive, and just make sure that you ask questions. I think the biggest thing that I hear from parents is educators are supposed to be, public educators. They're the ones that have been, saying X, Y, and Z about my child. So I've trusted and believed them. I'm not saying not to trust them or believe them, but it's certainly okay to ask questions. Ask questions. Why is my child not making progress? Why is my child struggling in the gen ed setting? Why is my child having behaviors? They're the experts, so they should be able to answer those questions. And if they struggle, then perhaps they need more resources. They need more they need more supports, right?
Definitely for parents to ask questions, not to be afraid.
Yes.
To use their voice, to ask questions, to really be that advocate for their child in the educational setting.
Yes. And also, like, if a school district says, this is our policy, it's okay to say, can I see that policy?
Okay.
It's okay for you to ask if something doesn't feel right, for them to direct you in the parental rights under IDEA where it states that. It's not that you're challenging, you're just looking for further information.
Yeah, I like that. Looking for further information. You're curious. It's like that curiosity. You're not just taking that first answer, especially like you said, if something feels off or something just doesn't feel right, as a parent, you're curious and you're kind of digging deeper into what that looks like for your child.
And you're a partner in your child's education.
Absolutely.
So if you're not curious and you go to a meeting and and the meeting's 30 minutes long and you don't answer any questions, the school team is very relieved in the sense that, oh, okay, we just pushed you through. We just pushed that child, that family through. But, it's just like any child when you go for a parent-teacher conference or have a meeting.
Yeah,
most
a great
parents
example.
Ask questions. Like they're presented work, they're presented their child's data and the work, and there should be a back and forth conversation like we're having right now regarding what their child can and can't do. That's the same premise, or that's the same way you should treat every IEP meeting or every meeting about your child's education.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about IEPs, so the individual education plan. What is the purpose of an IEP?
The purpose is to create an individualized plan for a child with a disability. And so what that looks like for parents is usually IEP, or all IEPs are generated from a psychological educational evaluation. So in Arizona they call that the MET. And that is where a school team, a school psychologist, a teacher, a special ed teacher, a general education teacher, perhaps a speech pathologist, perhaps an OT, PT perhaps, an adaptive PE teacher, they're all coming together. And I'm sure I've left other school-based resources out, but they come together and they evaluate a student. And when the student is found eligible under IDEA for special education services, an IEP is developed. And the IEP starts with the background information, which is directly from the psychoeducational evaluation. And then the next part of the IEP is the present levels. So that is where a school team talks about your child's reading. Their reading scores should be based on district assessment, should be based on teacher assessment, should be based on the general education teachers' observations and assessment. So it'll go over reading, writing, math, social emotional development, vocational, how they're doing in class, if they have fine and gross motor needs. So all of those pieces, their communication, their social communication, those pragmatics. So that's what the present levels are. What I often see in IEPs is very limited information. That is why I've gotten so good at reading so many IEPs, and I'm looking for specific things in an IEP. So under the reading section, I'm looking at all areas of reading. And if an IEP lacks that in the present levels, I will ask that. And so parents should feel empowered to ask those questions. I see that there's nothing written in here about my child's listening comprehension or reading comprehension. Can you tell me about their ability to read and comprehend or listen and comprehend? If that's not in the present levels, you want to know all of the information. You deserve to know all of the information, and all of the information should be addressed, or all of the areas of need should be addressed. So then, and this is a very long-winded.
Yeah, no, this is good. This is,
after the present levels, there's a consideration page.
Okay.
I'm doing this all off of memory, so I see these all the time. But the consideration page goes over whether or not the child needs behavioral supports. And I don't want people to think that behavior supports means that your child has to be eloping or aggressive or destroying property. No, behavior supports can mean that your child is off task, engaging in those low-level behaviors. What we call those low-level behaviors, maybe refusing to do work, maybe walking away and only engaging in non-preferred activities. Those are behaviors that need to be addressed. And when those are swept under the rug, oftentimes because they are swept under the rug because the child isn't having those outlandish behaviors, and those outlandish behaviors are the ones that receive the further assessment. You can still ask for further assessment of, why is my child not engaging in their work? Is it modified appropriately? Are they bored? Do they need more accommodations? Do they need help with reinforcement strategies to stay on task? There's hundreds of ways that we can address that. So that would be on the considerations page. Assistive technology would be on the considerations page. Medical needs would be on the considerations page. Whether the child has communication difficulties or vision impairments or hearing impairments, all of that is listed on a considerations page.
So I know that you talked about, you mentioned many individuals that could possibly be on an IEP team and their qualifications. And of course, a parent is one of those team members. Do you find that parents kind of hold back because they don't know necessarily what to ask or how to advocate? They might be a little intimidated, or they just don't know the questions. So do you find that that's why parents even come to you, because you kind of partner with them in that advocacy and you kind of take the reins and teach them and show them what are the proper questions they should be asking when it comes to IEPs?
Well, that is my hope, right?
Yeah.
So my hope is that I build myself out of a job for that individual case, child, client, family, that parents feel empowered to be able to walk into a meeting without me. I'm happy to go with them at all times, but without me, and ask those questions. I love when I receive emails when a parent will say, I went to a meeting today, I just got one 2 days ago. I went to a meeting today and I think we got it handled, and I felt empowered. I asked the questions and we're on the right track, and I'll just quick reply back of, yes, that's great. But a lot of parents feel intimidated. A lot of parents think, well, I'm not educated. And my answer to that is, yes, you are educated. You are educated in your child. You know what your child needs. You know what they're doing and what they're not doing, and all of that is valuable information to bring to the table.
Yes, absolutely, because you know your child best. So you are their biggest advocate, and so that's an important point that you bring up. So let's talk about how are IEPs typically implemented. What does that look like?
When we were talking about IEPs, I understand it was a long-winded conversation. I was only on the considerations page, but there is goals. You mentioned goals. Goals are developed based on need, and then goals drive the services, and then services drive what we call our LRE placement, or code. Lots of parents will hear level A, level B, level C, level D. D is private. So going back to this last question about how is it implemented. So the team takes and the parent is part of the team, an integral part of the team, takes the IEP, and out of that IEP decides where those goals are going to be served. That's the service minutes. So let's say there's a goal for a kindergarten student regarding learning letter sounds. Well, where do kids learn letter sounds? They learn letter sounds in kindergarten class in a typically developing general education kindergarten class. So where could that IEP goal be serviced? It could be serviced in the general education class by the general education teacher. It could be serviced by push and support from a special education teacher. It also could be serviced in an isolated setting by a special education teacher. But why? My question would be why? Why wouldn't the kid be able to be in a gen ed setting?
Yeah.
So the school team takes that IEP and they provide the services that are outlined on that IEP. Every quarter, usually some school districts are 4 quarters, some are the semester, you should receive what they call progress on goals.
Okay.
And that is sent usually with report cards. And that is where you look at data. Sometimes data exists and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm going to be honest. But the school team will give you data on each of the individualized goals. And that's how you monitor progress. Now, if we're talking about a kiddo that has maybe behaviors in the classroom, I, as an advocate, will try to advocate for more meetings where we look at the fidelity of the program that's being implemented and look at the data to see if the interventions are working. So maybe we call those team meetings, so maybe monthly meetings because when behavior is impeding learning, then your child is most likely not making progress on any of their academic goals. So you want to make sure that they're addressing the behavior first, and then they can address the academic goals.
And I love those examples that you give, because truly parents need to be aware and know how their child's progress is being tracked and reported.
Yes.
So those are great examples that you gave, Becca.
And parents can ask for the data.
Okay, that's good.
As an advocate, as a parent, I've asked for the data. Sometimes I get data and sometimes I'm told that it's coming and it never comes, which leads me to believe that it doesn't exist. When it doesn't come, I send up follow-up emails and I make sure I have everything in writing that, I remember I asked on such and such date, where's that data that you've collected to generate this goal or to tell me that my child is making progress. I'm not seeing that progress, so I would like to see the data where you're saying my child is making the progress. Or vice versa. Your data doesn't match what I'm seeing. My child is making huge gains with their communication skills, but you're saying that they're not. So it goes both ways.
Yeah. And so what does a parent do in that case? Say, like, for example, let's say a parent doesn't agree, first off, with an IEP's recommendations or with the data that they're seeing or receiving. What does a parent do in that case if there's that gap?
So if they don't agree with the IEP recommendations, there are certain areas where a parent doesn't have to consent to certain IEP. So placement is one of those areas. Services is one of those areas. You don't have to consent to everything in the IEP as a parent. If you are not receiving data that you've requested, definitely make sure that you have the requests in writing. You always are building a record. Even when things are going good, you're building record. You need to make sure you have everything in writing. When school teams will often, when an email is sent, I hear this all the time. And even about data, like, where's the data? I will hear from families, I immediately got a phone call. So nobody wants to put anything in writing. They want to have a conversation with parents, and that's okay too. My recommendation is then follow up after the phone call and say, per our phone call dated such and such, it is my understanding that you are collecting or you are trying to find the data, and you will get it to me by this Friday. Is my understanding correct? Get them to respond back in writing. If the data doesn't exist, parents can and this is a habitual problem, parents can file state complaints, they can file OCR complaints, they can hire an advocate, they can contact an attorney. That's those are some of the steps that parents can take.
Okay, so let's take an example. If a parent feels their IEP for their child is not being followed, the recommended IEP is not being followed, what do they do then? How do they become that advocate, that voice? How do they step in? What does that look like for a parent?
So with anything, you want to make sure you have evidence, right? So if you feel like the IEP is not being followed, like maybe an accommodation is not being implemented in the class, you can always send an email to that individual teacher and ask how and when the accommodation is being implemented. And if the teacher responds back and says, I didn't know about the accommodation, or I don't think that your child needs the accommodation, your child is not advocating or asking for that accommodation, there's your evidence, right? So then you could escalate it to the principal, the special education director, all in writing again, where you are identifying, here are the portions of my child's IEP that are not being implemented. If that still doesn't work, like I just said, filing a state complaint, hiring an advocate or an attorney. But really, I think parents, you have a voice as well, so you can work up those chains. You can also call ADE and go through the dispute resolution process. So there are many avenues, but if it's just a gut feeling that it's not being implemented, that's not enough. You have to have evidence. You have to have proof and documentation that the IEP or parts of the IEP are not being followed.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Those are really great tips. Let's talk a little bit about where parents should start when really just assessing their child's overall learning profiles. Specific needs or strengths of their child. What are some kind of, general tips that you would have as to where to even begin assessing your child's learning profiles?
Like if you suspect something is going on. So at every IEP meeting that I attend, I have the Arizona State standards pulled up on my screen, because I usually have my laptop up for that child's grade level. And if I already know that one of my clients is not at grade level in a subject area, I will also have the year before standard, maybe 2 years before. So I would say that parents could start at, there are preschool standards and then there's K-12 standards. They could start there on ADE's website, and that gives them guidance on, this is what my child is supposed to be learning in preschool and in kindergarten and first grade and so on. And then looking at, this, maybe you feel that your child is not reading at grade level. So that's kind of, that gives good guidance to parents of like what is expected. I guess that's where I would start.
Great. That's great. So many tips, so many good nuggets that, for sure. Those are all really
And
good.
there's also just like Googling, for like speech sounds, like in articulation. I do that often for all of my clients. I'm like, okay, I just sat in a meeting and a speech pathologist said that sound doesn't come until age 7 or 8. And I will not take that as a 100% fact. I will Google it even in a meeting. I will be like, when does the F sound come? That's a great tip. And then if it says earlier than what was stated, I will bring that up. And I will say, per this source, can you help me understand why we're not addressing that? When the child should be utilizing that sound in their communication. Because it's affecting not only their communication and their speech, but it's also affecting their ability to read. And
that's kind of what we were talking about a little while ago. That's where technology is your friend. You can look up. We were even talking about AI for a little bit, that don't be afraid to use technology to your benefit in those types of examples. So how do parents then know, in general speaking, just generally speaking, what special education programs or services are even available for their child. If they know that their child, falls into the special needs category, where do they even start with finding out what do those programs look like?
Asking the school, I'm saying that with caution, because sometimes the districts do not inform families of all of the services that are available for their child. So I would say certainly asking the school. One of the things that I tell all of my families, whether they're going to an IEP with me or not, because I get lots of calls for consultation, and some people sign on and some people don't, but what I tell all families is record the meeting. Always record the meeting. Okay. So that if there are services that you find out later that could have been available for your child, you can say, why didn't you say that in the meeting? Because that happens often. So I would say that the schools are a good resource. They're not always forthcoming. Some school districts are, some aren't, with all the services. I know there's a lot of Facebook groups out there. I know that there's a lot of support groups. I know that there is Sharing Down Syndrome. I think talking with other families and parents and saying, hey, what kind of services do you have? Opening up that conversation, because sometimes people don't even like assistive technology evaluations or a consult from an assistive technology specialist. Some families don't even know that on the groups, right? So I think just making sure that there's awareness out there of what can be done for kids. Inclusion specialists, they exist, they're out there. Behavior specialists, asking the school district first, but also not stopping there, not believing that that's the only level of service that can be provided, because sometimes even if it doesn't exist, you might be able to figure out a way to make it happen.
So really just again being the advocate, the best advocate that you possibly can, doing your own research. And I love how you said getting plugged into other community groups, even like Sharing Down Syndrome Arizona, even this conversation that we're having here, ways to increase your knowledge, get more resources, connect with other parents in the community who have, kiddos who have special needs, and you can, go back and forth with other people in that respect. So I love that you said that, because that's important. Because I feel like sometimes, just as parents in general, sometimes, we tend to take on the world. And there's a lot of times where sometimes we do feel alone. And it's important to know that you're not alone as a parent, but especially, as a special needs parent, there's just so many avenues and opportunities and communities that you can get plugged into. There are state level groups, Champions for Kids. There is national level groups, COPA, which is Council for Parents, Attorneys, and Advocates. There are a lot, and those are just two. I mean, there's so many. There are so many support groups out there where you can find out information. And you are not alone. That's important. That is very much important. So let's talk a little bit about, we've been talking, of course, this whole conversation is parents being the very best advocates for their kids. So let's touch on, how does a parent advocate if they want their kid, of course, based on assessments and goals and all of that, but how would they advocate if they want their kid in the least restrictive education setting or education environment? Any tips for that?
Start early. Start in preschool.
Okay.
Advocate for an inclusive preschool setting from the school district. If not in preschool, definitely in kindergarten, because I haven't found one student that I've advocated for that doesn't have goals that are aligned with kindergarten standards. The longer you wait, the harder it is. But I've been successful in getting students into a less restrictive environment after parents have come to me when they're in second, third, fourth grade.
Okay.
But goals drive the services.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at goals and a child is little, and they're working on their letters and recognition and letter sounds or learning their numbers, that's what a typical preschool, that's what a typical kindergartner is working on. So make sure that you advocate for those goals to be taught in the gen ed setting with push and supports. That's the key. The only time even occupational therapy and writing, right? So let's take fine motor.
Okay.
That can be in the gen ed setting. It doesn't need to be a pull out and work one-on-one with your child. It could be in the gen ed setting supporting the writing that is happening in the gen ed setting, because everybody's working on formulating their letters and letter sounds in preschool and and letters, not letter sounds, formulating their letters from top to bottom. The only time that I can see, in all honesty, where there would need to be pull out is maybe for those kiddos that are working on their intelligibility or articulation, so that they have an environment that is distraction free, where they can hear the sounds, they work on their tongue placement. But even social pragmatic goals, where should they best be taught? Of course, in the setting with the peers that are good peer models. That's the piece that I tell families. I actually tell IEP teams constantly this statement, which is, there is no place for our children when they graduate high school that's a segregated place. Like, there's not like a classroom, a self-contained classroom when they are 22 years old that they go to. They are part of our community, which is why they need to learn as part of the community. And the more we enable them and keep them away from the bigger part of our community, being in a class of 30, being in a hallway at a junior high school. How is that or being in a hallway at a junior high school when nobody's there, instead of with the whole population. I understand safety, but how does that teach them to navigate the world around them? How does that teach them to navigate a mall, a grocery store? And so being accepted at the beginning of their education is important, and inclusivity is very important at the beginning. And sometimes it's changing the minds of teachers and parents and educators that that a child should be included from day one, and be treated equally.
Absolutely.
And that's a tough thing for people sitting around a table and saying, well, this is what we've always done. I mean, that's what they're thinking. We've always just put your child with an intellectual disability in a self-contained classroom. And my answer is no. No, that child deserves an education in the general education setting. They're working on the same things. They might be a little bit slower, maybe not, but they're still working on the same goals.
And now you mentioned, it's so important to start as early as you possibly can, but for the parents, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, for the parents whose kids are maybe a little older, like I could understand or feel how there might be some discouragement there, but there's still hope, right? There's still hope even for kiddos that are in later grades.
Yes. Like you had mentioned, we were talking about AI. There were a couple of Magic School AI, and I get no kickback from this. I'm not pushing specific and Brisk AI. I just know those two AI programs can modify. I think earlier I used the example of like Hamlet. So a kid that is reading in high school, or reading Hamlet in high school, but maybe at a fourth grade reading level, there are modifications that can be put into place so that child could go to an ELA class in high school, in an inclusive setting, but have a modified version of the book and be able to still participate in conversations. So it's never too late. We just have to get the team to be on board with, what does that look like?
Well, I just love everything that you've shared, Becca, because, in your advocacy work and even in this conversation, just really, truly empowering parents to be strong voices for their child, no matter the age. So is there any final tips, any final advice that you would give to a parent?
Well, record your meetings.
Yes.
Follow up in writing. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't think that everybody sitting around the table at an IEP meeting is more of an expert on your child than you are. Mm-hmm. You are the biggest expert on your child. You know what your child needs. So if you know what they need, you should feel empowered to have the voice to advocate for those things. And don't let any school team make you feel that you shouldn't have that voice, because you are an equal member of an IEP team. Equal, if not more, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Parents should have a higher status in an IEP meeting. Yeah. And let's see what else. I'm sure I have more things that I could possibly say to you all, but don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge.
If there are parents who wanted to get in touch with you because they have further questions, or they wanted to pick your brain, or even, consult with you, how would they get in touch with you?
They can email me at Becca, BECCA, at 4Kids Advocacy, the number 4, kidsadvocacy.com. Or they can call my cell phone, which is 805-440-7524. Or they can find me on Facebook, and they can message me through Facebook. It's 4Kids Advocacy LLC.
Awesome. Well, Becca, you've been such a joy to talk to. So much great information. So thanks for coming and having this conversation with us today.
Thank you everyone.
And friends, we hope this conversation equipped you with some good tools in your tool belt as you continue to advocate for your child, to reach their fullest potential, not only in school but beyond. So make sure to tune in to the next Sharing with Friends on behalf of Sharing Down Syndrome Arizona, and we can't wait to keep the conversations going. See you next time.
Thank you.